15 years apart, she's no longer just a cadet. Now the alien beauty stands before her human captain, loyalty, desire, and destiny about to collide. The hangar bay of the ISS Intrepid thrummed with the metallic heartbeat of a warship preparing for departure. Engines pulsed somewhere deep within the armored hull, vibration carrying through the steel deck plates like the steady thrum of a giant drum. Crew members in navy blue uniforms moved with disciplined urgency, hauling supply crates, calibrating docking clamps, running final diagnostics on the shuttle that had just arrived. The massive bay doors loomed overhead, like the jaws of some mechanical beast, their segmented panels glowing faintly under the light of red hazard beacons. And in the midst of that orchestrated chaos stood a solitary figure. Captain Daniel Harris leaned on his sleek metal cane, the head carved into the shape of an eagle, the shaft polished to a mirror sheen. Each tap of the cane against the deck seemed to echo louder than the hammering boots of the younger officers rushing past. At 58, Harris carried himself with the weight of decades' years etched into the lines at the corners of his steel-gray eyes, campaigns reflected in the faint scars across his face. His hair, once black as void space, now gleamed silver beneath the hangar lights, combed back into a mane that lent him an air of rugged nobility. He still stood broad-shouldered beneath his dark brown officer's coat, leather-polished yet creased with age. Across the breast, the insignia of the Terran Fleet Command glimmered in gold, a symbol that never ceased to feel heavy with responsibility. The cane, though, was not for show. When he stepped forward, the gleam of polished alloy flashed beneath his coat hem. His right leg was no longer flesh, replaced long ago during the brutal days of the Proxima Centauri conflict. A draconid plasma charge had stolen the limb, but not the man's resolve. In its place, the Terran fleet had given him a top-of-the-line prosthetic, elegant, functional, and deadly. The leg housed weapon systems discreetly integrated into its design. Retractable blades, a pulse emitter, and a shockwave generator that had saved his life in close combat more times than he could count. But as Harris crossed the threshold of the shuttle ramp into the Intrepid's hangar, he felt a strange weight in his chest. 15 years. 15 years since he'd last set foot on a warship. 15 years since Proxima. The air smelled the same metal and machine oil undercut by the faint sterility of recycled oxygen. The sounds were the same too. The steady hum of the reactor core, the hydraulic hiss of docking clamps, the crackle of intercom chatter echoing through bulkheads. For him, it was like walking back into a memory. Yet time had passed, dragging both him and the galaxy forward, whether he liked it or not. Permission to come aboard, Harris declared, his deep voice carrying across the bay. From the cluster of officers awaiting him stepped Admiral Reeves. A portly man with a perpetually flushed face, Reeves exuded the kind of authority one earned from bureaucracy rather than battle. Still, his grip was firm as he extended his hand. Permission granted, Captain Harris. Welcome back to active duty. Harris clasped the Admiral's hand, his own grip iron strong, despite the faint tremor that sometimes lingered after long nights haunted by Proxima's ghosts. Never thought I'd see the inside of a warship again, after Proxima, Harris said. His words were half admission, half challenge. Reeves smiled tightly. The Arcturus situation demands our best. And despite that fancy walking stick of yours, you're still the finest tactical mind in the fleet. Harris's eyes narrowed slightly, though the faintest glimmer of pride touched them. Praise was cheap, but Reeves's words carried recognition of his long service and of the fact that no one else had commanded more desperate victories than he. Together, they walked through the corridors of the Intrepid. The ship was newer than Harris's last command, sleeker, its systems integrated with technologies that had seemed like science fiction a decade and a half ago. But the heartbeat of a battleship remained the same. The rhythmic footfalls of crew members reverberated against bulkheads, mingling with the background hum of propulsion systems. Here and there, enlisted personnel glanced at him as he passed, some with recognition, others with curiosity, at the living legend returned to duty. Harris ignored them, his gaze roaming the corridor walls, the decks, the control panels. It felt like coming home. You'll be briefed on the mission at Burrow 800 tomorrow, Reeves was saying. But before that, you should meet your first officer. She's waiting on the bridge, highly recommended, graduated top of her class at the academy. Harris nodded absently, his mind already shifting to tactical concerns. Arcturus had gone dark 3 weeks ago. Standard protocol dictated dispatching a scout ship, but intelligence had whispered of Draconid interference. If the enemy was establishing a foothold in that system, the response would need to be swift, decisive, ruthless. As they approached the bridge, Harris paused briefly at the sliding doors. For a moment, the sounds of Proxima echoed in his ears, the roar of engines, the frantic cries of wounded crewmen, the thunder of weapons fire shaking his bones. He forced the memories back into the abyss where they belonged and stepped forward. The doors hissed open. The bridge unfolded before him in a sweep of light and polished steel. Crew members bent over their stations, hands dancing across glowing consoles, voices murmuring status reports into comms. Holographic tactical displays flickered with lines of data. The captain's chair waited at the center like a throne of responsibility. Harris's eyes scanned the room, cataloging every officer, every position. And then he froze. At the tactical console stood a humanoid female whose very presence seemed to warp the air around her. Her skin shimmered lavender under the bridge lights, faintly luminous as though it carried its own soft glow. Long hair, silver lilac, was pulled back in regulation style, but no rulebook could hide the elegance in the way it cascaded against her uniform collar. The dark blue fabric hugged a frame both graceful and strong, a woman forged from both discipline and destiny. She turned, and recognition flared like lightning in her iridescent eyes that shifted between violet and silver depending on the angle of the light. "Lieutenant Commander Talia Nix, reporting for duty, sir," she said, her voice carrying the faint musical lilt characteristic of her species, the Lycians. Harris's grip tightened on his cane, his chest constricted with shock. The last time he had seen her, she had been barely an adult, an alien girl assigned under the Galactic Integration Program. She had scrubbed decks, run errands, learned human customs while representing her people. Just a child then. Now she stood before him, a confident officer bearing the authority of years earned. Talia Harris breathed, unable to mask his surprise. She approached with steady strides, stopping at a respectful distance. A smile touched the corners of her lips. "It's an honor to serve under your command again, Captain." Her eyes locked on his. "Now I'll show you what I've learned and how my role on this ship has changed." For a heartbeat, Harris was silent. Memories crashed against him. Proxima, the loss of horizon, the years of solitude and self-imposed exile. And now, like some cosmic twist of fate here, stood Talia, no longer a child, but a commander forged in the crucible of her own journey. Pride welled within him, mixed with something else he could not yet name. "I look forward to it, Commander," he said, voice steady once more. Reeves cleared his throat from the side. "I'll leave you to get acquainted with your crew captain. Mission briefing at 0800. The Intrepid departs at 1200 hours." As the Admiral departed, Harris and Talia stood in silence for a long moment. 15 years stretched between them like the void of space itself. Finally, Harris broke it with a quiet murmur. 15 years. You were just a kid running messages on the Dauntless. And you, she replied softly, were the hero of the Proxima campaign. Things change, Captain, but some things remain the same. She gestured toward the bridge where officers awaited his orders. Your ship is ready. Harris drew a breath, straightening his shoulders. The weight of command settled on him once more, heavy, yet familiar. Then let's not keep her waiting, he said. The past and the present collided in that moment, and the course of the future began to shift. The bridge of the Intrepid seemed to hush as the moment stretched between Captain Harris and Commander Talia Nix. Officers continued their work, but their glances flicked toward the pair with quiet curiosity. They knew the captain's reputation, but what they hadn't expected was the electricity humming in the air as he confronted a ghost from his own past. Harris's mind was a battlefield of memory. He remembered the integration program 15 years earlier when the Terran fleet had begun accepting alien cadets into its ranks, a bold experiment to forge unity among species still healing from centuries of distrust. On the Dauntless, his ship then Talia had been one of the first Lycians assigned. Barely 18, wide-eyed, her lavender skin and melodic voice had been strange novelties to his hardened human crew. Some officers had bristled, others had mocked, but Harris had insisted she be treated like any other recruit. And now here she stood, no longer a novice, but a woman transformed by time and trials. Talia broke the silence first, her voice firm yet warm. I never imagined we'd meet again like this. When I was assigned here, I didn't even know you were back in active service. The fleet kept that quiet. Harris's lips curled in a faint wry smile. They kept it quiet from me too until about a week ago. Her eyes softened. Then fate has a strange sense of humor. A laugh escaped Harris, surprising even himself. For years, laughter had felt foreign, yet here it was drawn out by the presence of this alien woman who had once been a girl swabbing decks under his command. He gestured to her console. First Officer, Tactical. That's quite a climb from running messages down corridors. She tilted her head, the corners of her mouth twitching upward. And I still remember your evaluation report before you left for Proxima. You wrote, Cadet Talia Nix demonstrates potential beyond her station. Sharp instincts, quick learner, ambitious. Those words were my anchor at the academy. Harris blinked. He had written hundreds of reports, evaluations for every junior crew member, but he remembered that one now. He remembered the sharp-eyed alien girl who asked questions about every system, every command decision, her curiosity insatiable. He hadn't expected her to remember his words. He certainly hadn't expected them to matter. You made it happen, he said at last. The Academy isn't kind to non-humans. No, she admitted, her gaze steady, but I had something to prove. Not just to them, but to myself, and maybe to you. Something stirred in Harris's chest. He didn't know what to call it, pride, affection, perhaps even guilt for underestimating her all those years ago. He turned his eyes back to the crew, breaking the intensity of the moment. Duty calls. Show me what you've learned, Commander. Talia's smile faded into the mask of professionalism expected of a first officer. Yet Harris caught the glint in her eyes. She intended to prove herself not only to the fleet, but to him. The hours that followed were a blur of briefings and preparations. Admiral Reeves departed, leaving Harris to walk the decks of the Intrepid. The ship felt at once familiar and alien. Its corridors were cleaner, its systems sleeker, its weapon arrays more advanced than those he had commanded at Proxima. Yet beneath the polish, the bones of a warship remained the same: armored bulkheads, humming conduits, the faint vibration of power thrumming beneath his boots. At every turn, Talia was there. She shadowed him not as an eager cadet, but as an equal, presenting crew rosters, tactical readiness reports, even subtle critiques of recent drill performance. Her confidence impressed him. Her voice carried authority. The crew listened to her not because of her exotic heritage, but because she had earned their respect. In the captain's ready room, Harris reviewed dossiers projected across a holographic table. Talia stood opposite him, pointing out the strengths and weaknesses of key officers. Lieutenant Parker at the helm, young, ambitious, sometimes reckless. He'll need firm guidance. Ree at tactical, she continued, a veteran, but his disdain for non-humans is noticeable. He'll obey, but he won't like taking orders from me. Harris's jaw tightened. He had fought too long and lost too many lives to tolerate prejudice on his bridge. If he gives you trouble, you let me know. He respects me. He'll learn to respect you. Their eyes met across the glowing table. A silent exchange, past gratitude on her part, reassurance on his. Harris realized then that Talia was not simply his subordinate. She was the link between his past and his future, the bridge between what he had lost and what he might yet find. Later, alone in his quarters, Harris found himself staring at the reflection of his prosthetic leg. The polished metal gleamed in the dim light. 15 years ago, he had believed it marked the end of his career. He had believed Proxima had taken not just his leg, but his command, his purpose. Now he was back, not as a relic, but as a commander once more. And Talia was back too. The galaxy had changed in 15 years, but somehow their paths had converged again. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling a long breath. Life has a way of coming full circle, he muttered to himself. The next morning, the briefing room was filled with senior officers. A holographic star map rotated at the center of the table, projecting the Arcturus system in flickering light. Admiral Reeves traced energy signatures across the display, explaining the anomalies. The system had gone silent 3 weeks earlier. Mining colonies, trade routes, all communication cut. Standard procedure would have sent scouts, but intelligence suggested draconid activity. Harris leaned forward, cane tapping rhythmically against the floor as he studied the data. These signatures match phase shift technology, he said grimly. Talia nodded, her voice carrying quiet conviction, the same they were developing at the end of Proxima. Harris turned his head, impressed by her readiness. You've done your homework, Commander. I've made it my business to understand our enemies, she replied, her tone edged with something personal. Especially those who've hurt people I respect. The comment lingered in the air, unspoken history pressing down on them both. Harris cleared his throat and turned back to the map, but inside he felt the weight of her words. Respect, admiration, maybe more. After the meeting, as the officers dispersed, Talia approached him with a data pad. The crew manifest and tactical assessments you requested, sir. Harris gestured for her to sit. Up close, he noticed the faint patterns etched across her lavender skin, the subtle Lysian markings unique to her northern continent. They glimmered faintly under the room's lights like silver veins just beneath the surface. 15 years is a long time, he said quietly. Last I saw you, you were just a girl chasing dreams. She smiled softly, and dreaming of my own command. Quite the journey from deckhand to first officer. Harris raised an eyebrow. And what pushed you to apply to the academy? Her voice softened. After you were injured at Proxima, after you left. I decided I couldn't just run errands. I had to become more. Your recommendation helped open doors. Harris felt a flicker of guilt remembering that routine evaluation he had barely thought about. Yet those words had changed her life. I only wrote the truth, he said. You had potential. And I had to prove you right, she countered. For a moment, silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken things. Harris studied her face, the determination that poised the spark in her iridescent eyes. He realized then that she wasn't just here by coincidence. Fate had placed her beside him again, and it unsettled him more than any Draconid weapon. When the call came, Captain Harris to the bridge were approaching departure coordinates. He rose, leaning on his cane. Duty calls, Commander. They walked side by side through the corridors, silence between them now comfortable rather than strained. Crew members straightened at their passing eyes, flicking from the veteran captain to his alien first officer. Together they embodied both the past and the future of the Terran fleet. As the doors to the bridge slid open, Harris felt the weight of command settle once more on his shoulders. He stepped toward the captain's chair. It felt foreign yet familiar, like slipping into an old uniform that still fit, though the fabric had aged. Status report, he called. All systems nominal, Captain reported Parker from the helm. Coordinates for the Arcturus jump plotted and locked. Harris nodded, glancing toward Talia at tactical. Her fingers danced over controls with ease, her voice calm and authoritative, as she confirmed weapon calibrations and shield readiness. She looked every bit the officer she had dreamed of becoming. And as Harris settled into his chair, his eyes met hers across the bridge. For the first time in 15 years, he felt not just the weight of the past, but the promise of a future. The Intrepid slipped into the cold expanse of deep space with the grace of a predator uncoiling. From the bridge, the starfield stretched endless and indifferent, a sea of white pinpricks scattered across the abyss. For Captain Harris, it was a view he had once thought he would never see again, the infinite void that had been both his battlefield and his home. Now, 15 years after Proxima, he found himself at its mercy once more. The senior staff gathered in the briefing room, its walls lined with display panels that projected shifting holographic maps. At the center of the table, the Arcturus system glowed in rotating detail, a red giant star orbited by 7 planets, trade lanes branching outward like veins from a heart. The system's significance was obvious. 3 major routes intersected there, routes that connected human colonies with key Lycian trade hubs. Whoever controlled Arcturus controlled the lifeblood of interstellar commerce. Admiral Reeves stood at the head of the table, his hands sweeping through the projection to magnify one of the outer planets. Arcturus 4, mining colony. Last transmission 3 weeks ago mentioned unusual energy signatures near the processing stations. Then silence. All communication cut off. Murmurs rippled among the officers. Mining colonies were the backbone of the Terran fleet's infrastructure. Losing one was a blow. Losing an entire system would be catastrophic. Reeves's face hardened. Standard procedure would have dispatched a scout vessel, but intelligence reports suggest Draconid involvement. The signatures detected match experimental technologies they pursued at the end of the Proxima conflict. Harris tapped his cane against the floor, the metallic click punctuating the silence. His eyes fixed on the display's sharp and calculating. Phase shift technology. Talia's voice followed low and certain. The ability to pull matter partially out of normal space-time. Difficult to detect. Resistant to conventional weaponry. Her gaze flicked toward Harris, the same prototypes they tested 15 years ago. Harris studied her. There was no hesitation in her tone, no guesswork. She spoke as one who had studied every scrap of data, every classified file. He gave her a slight nod. If the Draconids have perfected it, then Arcturus isn't just lost, it's the staging ground for a campaign. From there, they can strike 3 sectors before we can mount a proper defense. Reeves's expression turned grave. Exactly. Which is why the Intrepid has been recalled to service. Your orders are simple. Captain Harris, investigate, determine the extent of Draconid presence, and neutralize any threat. His eyes swept the room. Failure is not an option. Harris leaned forward, his broad shoulders casting a shadow across the hologram. Neutralize, he echoed. With theoretical responses to theoretical weapons, his mouth twisted into a grim smile. Nothing new there. We'll adapt as we always have. When the meeting broke, Harris lingered, studying the map as the others filed out. The room grew quiet until only he and Talia remained. She approached, the hands clasped behind her back, her presence calm, yet charged with unspoken thoughts. Those energy signatures, she began softly. I've seen them before. In classified research following Proxima, we feared they were more than just weapons. We feared they could manipulate not only space but time itself. Harris's head turned sharply. Time. She nodded, her iridescent eyes catching the glow of the star map. Temporal displacement was always a theoretical risk. If the Draconids have mastered it, then what we face may be far worse than cloaked ships. We may be facing distortions of reality itself. The words chilled him, though his face betrayed nothing. He gave a single curt nod, filing the revelation away. Then we prepare for the worst. Hours later, the Intrepid emerged from FTL into the edge of the Arcturus system. The jump was smooth, but Harris's instincts screamed the moment the stars stabilized on the main view screen. Something was wrong. He gripped the arms of his chair, his gaze sweeping across the tactical display. Status report, he barked. Lieutenant Parker's fingers flew over his console. Coordinates are off by 0.3 parsecs, Captain. We're on the outer edge of the system. Unknown, sir. Jump calculations were checked 3 times. But Parker hesitated, eyes widening. Sensors show unusual energy readings across the system. They may have interfered with the jump. Talia moved swiftly to the science station, her hands gliding across controls. Her voice carried urgency. Confirmed. The distortions are spread like ripples between planets. Phase shift technology on a system-wide scale. A low murmur spread across the bridge. Harris rose, leaning heavily on his cane as he stepped toward the main display. The view screen magnified Sector 4 at his command, revealing what looked like ripples of liquid glass warping the black of space itself. What the hell are we looking at, he muttered. Distortions, Talia whispered, her tone hushed, almost reverent in its dread. The Draconids have deployed their technology across the entire system. They've turned Arcturus into a cage. Before Harris could reply, Lieutenant Commander Rhea at Tactical stiffened. Captain picking up a vessel at the edge of sensor range. Weak signal. Using an old IFF transponder code. Terran fleet. The bridge fell into silence. All eyes turned to Harris. There shouldn't be any Terran ships here, he said slowly, his voice edged with steel. Identify. Rhea swallowed. The registry, it matches the TF horizon. Time stopped. Harris felt his blood run cold. His grip on his cane tightened until his knuckles whitened. That's impossible, he whispered. The horizon was destroyed at Proxima. I watched it die. Talia looked up from her station, her face pale under the lavender glow of her skin. The signal is authentic, Captain, and it's transmitting on an encrypted channel using your personal command code. The weight of her words crashed over him like a tidal wave. That code had been buried with the horizon 15 years ago. No one else should have had access. No one else could possibly use it. Orders, Captain Rhea asked, his voice tight. Harris stood in silence, the bridge holding its collective breath. Images flooded his mind. His first command, the desperate battle at Proxima, the moment the horizon had rammed a Draconid dreadnought in a blaze of sacrifice. And above all, the face of Captain James Mercer, his mentor and friend, who had died aboard her. Or had he? Harris drew a slow, steadying breath. Yellow alert. Helm set course for the signal, but maintain distance. Tactical ready all weapons, but keep them powered down. If this is a trap, we won't spring it blind. The crew snapped into motion, the hum of systems rising as alerts flashed across the bridge. Talia approached Harris's side, her voice low. If the horizon is really out there, then either someone salvaged her, or phase shift technology is doing more than bending space. It could be bending time. Harris turned his head, meeting her gaze. The possibility hung between them, unspoken yet undeniable. You're saying we might be looking at a ghost ship pulled out of the past? Talia's expression was grim, or a crew still living in a moment that ended 15 years ago. Minutes stretched into eternity as the Intrepid closed on the source of the signal. The view screen flickered, adjusting focus as the ship's sensors pierced through layers of distortion. And then the silhouette emerged, a Terran battlecruiser, scarred and broken, drifting against the stars like a corpse. Harris's heart lurched. He knew every line of that hull, every contour of its design. The horizon, his first command, his greatest failure. Life signs, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Talia's hands danced across controls. Minimal power signatures. Life support is active in sections of the ship, but sensors can't confirm life signs through the distortion. The bridge fell silent, the crew staring at the spectral image. Harris's chest tightened with memories. The evacuation orders, the desperate battle, Mercer's final transmission before the horizon made its suicide run. It had been the end of an era, the moment that had shattered him. And now, here it was again. Ree's voice shattered the stillness. Captain movement within the distortions, multiple signatures, Draconid configuration. They were waiting for us, Harris realized aloud, his jaw tightening, using the horizon as bait. Alarms blared as the tactical display lit up. 3 Draconid warships decloaked, their angular hulls bristling with weapons. The trap had been sprung. Red alert, Harris commanded, his voice hard as steel. Shields up, weapons online, evasive pattern Delta. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos, crew members shouting confirmations, consoles flashing warnings. The Intrepid banked sharply, stars tilting on the view screen as Draconid energy weapons sliced across the void. Talia's voice rang clear across the noise. Captain, the distress signal just changed. It's transmitting a data packet. On screen, Harris ordered. The view split, the scarred hull of the horizon on one side, a block of text on the other. The words burned across the display. Harris, they pulled us out of time. 15 years for you, 3 days for us. Draconids using Horizon crew for experiments. Help us. Mercer. Harris staggered back, the words hitting him like a physical blow. His vision swam. Mercer alive, after all this time. Sir Ree shouted, urgency cutting through his daze. Draconid vessels closing in. 3 warships bearing 045 Mark 120. Harris clenched his jaw, his mind snapping back into the present. He turned to his crew, his voice a roar that cut through the chaos. Return fire, target the lead vessel, and prepare a boarding party. If there are survivors on the horizon, we're bringing them home. The Intrepid shook under the first barrage of Draconid fire. The deck plates trembled, lights flickered, and the scent of ozone filled the bridge as shields absorbed the blast. Warning klaxons blared in crimson pulses, casting the room in waves of red light. Shields holding at 82%, Ree barked from tactical, his voice steady but edged with tension. Harris gripped the arms of his command chair, his cane resting across his knees. His eyes were locked on the ghostly image of the horizon drifting beyond the distortions. Memory screamed at him, men and women he had ordered to evacuate, their terrified faces as the dreadnought bore down. Mercer's final words crackling through comms, promising sacrifice. 15 years he had carried the guilt, believing them gone. And now, Mercer was calling for help. The rational part of his mind screamed that it was impossible, that the Draconids were using illusions and code theft to bait him. But the part of him forged in blood and loyalty knew otherwise. He had felt Mercer's hand on his shoulder, had trusted him with his life more than once. If there was even a chance, Captain Talia's voice cut into his thoughts. She stood at his side, calm but firm, her iridescent eyes fixed on him. With respect, sir, we're outnumbered and outgunned. The Intrepid can't hold against 3 Draconid warships and still attempt a rescue. We need to consider withdrawal. The bridge fell silent, all ears, waiting. Harris's jaw clenched, his teeth grinding together. Withdrawal. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. He had withdrawn once at Proxima. He had obeyed Mercer's order to pull the fleet back, leaving the horizon to its fiery fate. He had lived with that decision every day since. He slammed his cane against the deck, the clang echoing through the bridge. No, I left those people behind once. I will not do it again. Ree frowned, fingers hesitating over his console. Sir, with respect, this could be a trap. Then it's a trap. We'll spring. Harris snapped. His voice carried the weight of command, the finality of a man unwilling to bend. If Mercer and his crew are alive, they've been prisoners of war for 15 years of our time. For them, it's been days. I won't abandon them. A heavy silence pressed down on the bridge. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but none dared contradict him. Even Ree, grumbling under his breath, resumed calibrating weapons. Talia's expression, though, was different. Not fear, not doubt. Something more complicated, concern, and perhaps an understanding deeper than anyone else in the room. She leaned closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. Captain, I know what this means to you, but if you're making this call for the wrong reasons, if it's guilt guiding your hand, then you risk all of us. Harris's eyes met hers, steel meeting silver violet. You think my judgment is compromised? I think you're human, she answered softly, and that's both your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. For a moment, his temper flared, but he quelled it, recognizing the truth in her words. He leaned toward her, voice rough. Call it guilt, call it duty, I don't care. What matters is this, those are our people out there. And if there's even a sliver of a chance we can bring them home, I'll take it. Her lips pressed together, then she gave the faintest nod. Then I'm with you. The order went out. Yellow alert to red alert. All hands battle stations. Prepare boarding teams. Down in the shuttle bays, Marines scrambled into gear rifles slung across armored vests, helmets sealed. Engineers prepped drop ships, their hulls gleaming under floodlights. Medical officers loaded stasis pods and triage kits. The air was electric with both dread and determination. On the bridge, Harris coordinated. Tactical, suppressive fire only. Keep their weapons focused on us, not the horizon. Helm maneuver between the distortions, make us the bigger target. Engineering, divert power to shields and engines. We'll need every ounce of maneuverability. Ree's scowl deepened. That means weapons won't be at full output, Captain. Good, Harris growled. We're not here for glory. We're here to save lives. In the ready room, Harris met Talia once more. She had already donned her combat harness, a compact sidearm strapped to her hip, and a data pad glowing in her hand. She radiated calm efficiency, but Harris could sense the storm beneath her composed exterior. You'll lead the boarding party, he said. Her head tilted sharply. Sir, with respect, that should be your role. They'll trust you. Harris shook his head. I need to remain here. Someone has to command the Intrepid through this fight. You have the tactical knowledge and the field training. More importantly, he hesitated, then met her gaze. You know more about Draconid technology than anyone else on this ship. Don't bother denying it. I've seen the way you read their patterns, as if you've studied them for years. For a heartbeat, she said nothing. Then her shoulders dropped, a quiet admission. There are things not in my official record. I was part of a joint research initiative after Proxima. I studied captured Draconid tech. Her eyes met his, unwavering. If we're going to survive this, you need me on that ship. Harris stepped closer, his hand gripping her arm, not as captain to officer, but as comrade to comrade. Then bring them home, Commander. Bring him home. For the first time, her composure cracked just slightly. I will, sir. The Draconid warships closed in, their weapons flaring like the eyes of predators. The Intrepid rocked under another salvo, shields flashing. 75% in falling, recalled. Return fire target their lead ship's propulsion. Slow them down, Harris commanded. Bolts of plasma and streaks of missiles surged from the Intrepid's batteries, slamming into the enemy. Explosions blossomed against scaled armor, plating ripples of energy, scattering across distorted space. The void lit with fury. Through the chaos, the first boarding shuttle detached, engines flaring as it darted toward the scarred hulk of the horizon. On board, Talia gripped her seed eyes, locked on the ghostly silhouette looming larger with every second. Marines checked weapons. The silence was broken only by the hum of stabilizers and the distant thunder of battle outside. Over comms, Harris's voice rang steady. Intrepid to boarding team. You have 3 minutes of cover before they reposition. Make them count. Understood, Talia replied, her voice steel. On the bridge, Harris leaned forward in his chair, eyes glued to tactical displays. The shuttle was a small blip moving across the screen, vulnerable, fragile. Every instinct in him screamed to be there with them, to lead from the front, as he always had. But his duty was here. He had to trust her. Ree glanced at him. Captain, their fire's concentrating on our starboard shields. We can't keep this up forever. Harris slammed his cane against the deck once more. Then let's show them what happens when you corner a Terran ship. Helm, bring us between the horizon and those bastards. Tactical focus everything on their weapons arrays. Make them bleed. The Intrepid surged forward, engines roaring as it cut a path through the maelstrom. Bolts of fire lanced from its cannons, tearing into Draconid hull plating. Explosions rippled across enemy ships, the battlefield alive with fire and fury. Yet through it all, Harris's eyes never left the blip on the display, Talia's shuttle racing toward the horizon. In that moment, his decision crystallized. He had chosen to risk his crew, his ship, his very command, for the faintest chance of redemption. Logic said it was madness. Military doctrine said it was reckless. But Harris's voice carried across the comms with unshakable conviction. We left them once. We will not leave them again. Not while I draw breath. The bridge crew, caught in the gravity of his words, found themselves nodding, their resolve steeled. Even Ree, scowling, still muttered under his breath, "Damn fool, Captain," as his fingers flew with renewed vigor across the tactical console. The Intrepid shuddered under another blast, but Harris remained unflinching, his voice a growl. Hold the line. Give them the time they need. And as the horizon grew larger on the screen, its scarred hull looming like the face of the past, Harris knew the die was cast. He had made his choice. There would be no turning back. The boarding shuttle jolted violently as it cut through the rippling distortions surrounding the horizon. To Talia, it felt like pushing through syrup and smoke. At the same time, an invisible resistance clawed at her bones, while her stomach lurched with the sensation of being pulled in multiple directions at once. The air itself shimmered like heat waves rising from pavement on a blazing day. Steady, she ordered, her voice calm, despite the disorienting pull of the phase shift field. Her hand braced against the bulkhead, knuckles tightening until her claws scraped the alloy. Around her, 5 armored Marines gritted their teeth, their helmets flickering as onboard sensors scrambled against the interference. Sergeant Mills, a scar-faced veteran who had served in 3 separate campaigns, spat a curse. Feels like the whole damn ship's trying to twist us inside out, Commander. How the hell do we fight an enemy that messes with time itself? Talia adjusted the chronometric stabilizer strapped to her wrist, the device emitting a faint blue glow. We don't fight time, Sergeant. We anchor ourselves against it. She raised her voice so all could hear. Stay within 5 meters of me at all times. The stabilizers are linked. If you stray too far, you'll drift into another temporal flow, and you won't be coming back. That silenced the grumbling. With a screech of protesting metal, the shuttle docked with the horizon's emergency airlock. The impact reverberated through their bones, followed by the hiss of atmosphere equalizing. The boarding light switched from red to green. Lock and load Mills barked. Weapons clicked as rifles were charged and safeties disengaged. Talia's calm voice cut through the tension. Remember, our mission is rescue. The Draconids will be expecting us, but the ship itself is as dangerous as any enemy. Trust your stabilizers, trust your training, and stay close. The airlock cycled, and with a hiss of ancient hydraulics, the door opened onto a corridor bathed in dim emergency lighting. The smell hit them first. Stale air tinged with rust and something older like dust that had been sealed for centuries. Shadows clung to the walls, long and shifting, cast by flickering lights that hummed faintly. The bulkheads bore scars of battle scorch marks where plasma had cut deep, jagged gouges where claws or shrapnel had torn through steel. But the strangest thing was the contradiction. Some sections of the corridor looked fresh, as if the damage had been inflicted only hours ago. Others appeared ancient, with rust creeping like rot dust, thick enough to choke, and bulkheads corroded into brittle, flaking metal. Ensign Chesterfield, the team's engineer, swept his scanner across the wall, his brow furrowed. According to this, the air in this section was recycled both 3 days ago and 15 years ago. Temporal displacement, Talia murmured. Different parts of the ship are living in different slices of time. This whole vessel is fractured. As they advanced, the distortion grew worse. Ahead, the corridor rippled faintly like liquid glass. Talia raised her hand. Temporal boundary. Activate your stabilizers. The Marines tapped their wrist units. Blue light pulsed faintly from each device, forming a fragile lattice around the team. Talia stepped forward first. The sensation was immediate and nauseating, like being stretched thin across 1,000 moments, while crushed into a single instant. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself through. The barrier rippled like water, then snapped around her, stabilizing. On the other side, she staggered and caught herself. The corridor here looked entirely different. Dust blanketed every surface and the metal bulkheads sagged with corrosion. A skeleton of some long-dead crewman slumped against the wall, uniform tattered bones brittle with age. Mills cursed softly behind her as the rest of the team followed. One side looks like the battle just ended. This side looks like it's been rotting for decades. How the hell do we fight in a place like this? Talia's voice was grim. By remembering that time is our enemy now. The team advanced deeper, navigating junction after junction. Each temporal boundary brought new horrors rooms where flickering lights cast shadows of crew who had perished minutes ago, adjacent to sections where the same crew lay as mummified husks decades dead. The Marines grew quieter with each step, their bravado slipping under the weight of the unnatural. Chesterfield muttered under his breath, "This isn't a ship anymore. It's a graveyard across time." Finally, Lieutenant Reed, the medic, froze as his scanner beeped. Life signs. 2 decks up, auxiliary control room. Relief flickered across weary faces. Talia nodded sharply. Move. At the junction leading to auxiliary control, another boundary shimmered. Talia stepped through, first leading the way into a chamber that was surprisingly intact. The emergency lights glowed steady, consoles hummed faintly, and the air was warmer. 5 figures turned toward them. Their Terran fleet uniforms were worn but intact. At their head stood a gray-haired man with captain's insignia, his weathered face lined with exhaustion. His eyes widened, shifting from disbelief to desperate hope. "Terran Fleet Command," he rasped. Talia lowered her weapon, her heart pounding. "Yes, sir. Lieutenant Commander Talia Nix of the Intrepid. We're here to evacuate survivors." The man's gaze locked on her, recognition dawning. Despite the silver in his hair and the deep lines of age, she knew his face from history records from Harris's stories. "Mercer," she breathed. "Captain James Mercer." His lips curved into a weary smile. "Thank God. We were beginning to think no one would ever find us." Behind him, his surviving officers exchanged glances of relief and disbelief. One woman's haunted eyes brimmed with tears. Talia's voice softened. "For the galaxy, 15 years have passed since Proxima. You and the horizon were reported destroyed." Mercer's expression hardened. "For us, it's been complicated. In this room, it's been about 3 weeks, but step through that door." He gestured to the hatch leading deeper into the ship. "And you'll find crew who've only lived 3 days. In the lower decks." His voice trailed off. The woman spoke, her voice shaking. "Time runs faster there. We sent a team to check the engine room 2 days ago. When they didn't return, the captain went after them. He found their bodies. They'd aged decades and hours." The words hung heavy in the air. Reed paled, his medical scanner trembling in his grip. Talia swallowed hard. "And the Draconids, they board periodically," Mercer said grimly. "They take crew for experiments. They're trying to weaponize the temporal effect to control it. They installed a drive core in engineering. Some alien monstrosity that powers this whole nightmare." Before Talia could respond, her comm crackled with Harris's voice strained and urgent through static. "Commander Doctora, reinforcements. 5 more warships. 15 minutes before. Overwhelmed. The connection fizzled. Talia turned back to Mercer, urgency flashing in her eyes. Sir, how many survivors? 43 scattered in the stable zones. Talia did the math instantly. Their shuttle could carry 12 at most. Multiple trips were impossible with the Draconid fleet closing. Unless, her gaze sharpened. Captain, is the Horizon's main drive operational? Barely, Mercer admitted. We've been on auxiliary power for weeks. But the temporal core, the one the Draconids installed, is in engineering. Accessible, but it's inside one of the worst time zones. Anyone who enters ages decades in minutes. Talia's stabilizer pulsed faintly on her wrist. She studied its readings, her mind racing. If I modify our stabilizers, I can create a temporal bubble. Enough to enter the core and reverse the effect. It could stabilize the entire ship long enough to evacuate everyone. Mills swore, that's suicide. Even with stabilizers, the energy will cook us alive. Not if I recalibrate them, Talia countered. Her eyes locked on Mercer's. But I need someone who knows the ship's systems, especially the modifications the Draconids made. Mercer's weathered face set with determination. Then I'll go. I've studied their tech as much as I could. This is my ship, my responsibility. Sir, one of his officers protested. I'm still the captain of the Horizon, Mercer said sharply. And I'll be damned if I let anyone else take this risk. He turned to Talia. Let's move, Commander. As the survivors huddled in auxiliary control, guarded by the Marines, Talia and Mercer prepared to descend into the nightmare below. She adjusted her stabilizer, boosting its power output. The device hummed louder, its glow brighter. Harris, she called through the comm, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. We're going to engineering. We'll stabilize the core. Buy us as much time as you can. Static crackled back. Then Harris's voice low but resolute. Bring them home, Commander. Talia looked at Mercer. He gave a grim nod. And together they stepped into the fractured corridors of the Horizon, descending into the heart of temporal chaos. The descent into the Horizon's lower decks was like walking into a fever dream. Every corridor shimmered with distortions, each bulkhead whispering of different ages. A section of wall might be bright with scorch marks, as if the battle had ended minutes ago, only for the next bulkhead to sag under decades of rust and decay. Talia's stabilizer pulsed frantically on her wrist, blue light wrapping her in a protective bubble of anchored time. Even so, nausea gnawed at her. Her head swam with the constant lurch of shifting perception. Lights flickered too slowly. Footsteps echoed out of rhythm and shadows lagged seconds behind their owners. Mercer trudged beside her, his once proud shoulders bent with fatigue, but his gaze unyielding. He held a data pad that flickered with half-functioning schematics, its readings blurring and reappearing as if it too couldn't decide what century it belonged to. How much farther? Talia asked, her voice tight. Mercer checked the display. 2 junctions. But the next sector is one of the worst affected. Time runs nearly 50 times faster there. Talia frowned, recalibrating her stabilizer. The device hummed louder, fighting to maintain integrity. Then we'll need another route. If we enter that zone unprotected, we'll age years in minutes. She traced the schematics with her eyes searching for alternatives. Here, she tapped the map. A maintenance shaft. Narrow, but it bypasses the worst distortions. Mercer peered at the path, then gave a grim nod. Tight fit, but better than ending up fossils before we reach the core. They pried open the access panel and crawled into the shaft. The space was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for their shoulders. Dust clung to the walls, but it was strange dust in some patches, ancient and gray. In others, fresh as if disturbed only hours ago. As they crawled, Mercer broke the silence. You serve under Harris now. Yes, Talia replied. He was a hell of an officer at Proxima. Saved what was left of the fleet with that flanking maneuver. I trusted him with everything. His voice softened. He still blames himself for leaving us. Talia paused, twisting to glance at him. You shouldn't have to tell me this, Captain. I've seen the guilt in his eyes. It's written into every decision he makes. Mercer's jaw tightened. That's on me. I gave the order to ram the dreadnought. I told him to withdraw, but Harris, he carries every life as though it's carved into his bones. If you're serving with him now, don't let that guilt blind him. Talia absorbed his words in silence. She knew Mercer was right. Harris's determination to rescue the horizon was noble but also dangerous. They reached the junction. The shaft opened into a corridor that bore the scars of battle-scorched marks, collapsed beams, even the desiccated corpse of a Draconid soldier, its armor mummified by accelerated decay. The sight was grotesque flesh, half-gone armor, half-rusted, time itself having devoured the enemy. They boarded here often, Mercer said grimly, stepping carefully past the corpse. Took crew for experiments. Brought equipment. We fought them off when we could. Talia's stomach nodded. The Draconids hadn't just trapped the horizon in temporal chaos, they had fed on as survivors like predators circling a wounded beast. Finally, they reached the massive sealed doors of engineering. A shimmering distortion rippled around the frame, thick and dangerous. Talia scanned at her stabilizer, buzzing angrily. Time inside is flowing about 15 times faster than normal, she murmured. We'll have 20 minutes of subjective time before our stabilizers fail. After that, Mercer finished for her, we age a year for every 4 minutes we stay. He squared his shoulders. Let's not overstay our welcome. They adjusted their stabilizers to maximum output. Blue light flared around them brighter and steadier, though the devices hummed with strain. Ready, Talia asked. As I'll ever be, Mercer replied. Together, they stepped through. The sensation was overwhelming, like diving into a tidal wave made of raw time. For an instant, Talia felt her skin crawling with accelerated aging, her lungs straining as if years of wear pressed into them. Then the stabilizer stabilized, and the nausea ebbed. Engineering was a nightmare. The Horizon's original systems had been fused with alien machinery. Tubes of pulsating blue liquids snaked across the walls, their light casting eerie shadows. Control panels flickered in alien glyphs mixed with Terran readouts. At the center stood the temporal drive core, a crystalline structure, blurring at the edges as if it couldn't decide which moment in time to exist in. Its surface shimmered with overlapping realities, fragments of past and future layered over one another. Mercer's breath caught. By the stars. Talia moved quickly to a console, her fingers flying across the alien interface. I need to access their control protocols. Can you check the power relays? We need to know if the system can handle a reverse pulse. Mercer nodded and crossed to the relays, his face grim in the blue light. These modifications. The Draconids were experimenting with stabilizing temporal waves. They turned the entire horizon into a laboratory. Talia's comm crackled with Harris's voice fragmented through interference. Commander, reinforcements, shields failing, evacuation. The signal dissolved into static. She clenched her jaw and worked faster. Her training with the Secret Research Initiative surged back, hours spent dissecting Draconid code, memorizing fail-safes, learning how their systems thought. Every glyph on the console was both alien and familiar, an echo of the past she had hidden even from Harris. Mercer returned, sweat beading his weathered forehead. The relays are barely stable. Whatever you're planning, we won't get a second attempt. I'm going to reverse the polarity of the temporal field, Talia said. If I can cascade the effect, it should collapse the boundaries and realign the ship with normal space-time. Mercer arched a brow. That's theory. Has it ever been tested? On this scale, no, but it's our only chance. Her stabilizer beeped a warning, 15 minutes left. She worked furiously, bypassing security layers, overriding safeguards. The Draconid system adapted, trying to lock her out, forcing her to improvise. Sweat dripped down her lavender skin, her silver lilac hair sticking to her cheeks as she bent over the console. Suddenly, alarms blared. Red glyphs scrolled across the display. What is it? Mercer demanded. They've detected us. Security lockdown initiated. Her fingers flew. I need more time. The stabilizer beeped again. 10 minutes left. Time, Mercer said grimly, is the one thing we don't have. Talia's mind raced. If she couldn't reverse the field, there was another option: destabilize it. Destroy the core collapse, the temporal effect in one violent burst. It won't be elegant, she said, but I can set a controlled collapse. A countdown. Enough time to evacuate the survivors before the horizon is obliterated. Mercer's eyes hardened, then softened with something like acceptance. The horizon died at Proxima. This will just make it official. Talia swallowed her emotions and reconfigured the console. Destabilization was simpler than control. Within minutes, the system accepted her commands, the countdown set to 30 minutes. Done, she said. 30 minutes until collapse. Mercer moved to a nearby console. I'll download the ship's logs. Fleet Command needs to know what the Draconids were doing here. Talia's stabilizer shrieked a warning, 5 minutes of protection left. Then we move, she said. They raced from engineering, each boundary crossing more nauseating than the last. The corridors seemed to writhe, reality bending as the temporal core grew unstable. Mercer's voice broke the silence as they ran. Commander, if we don't make it out, what you did in there was exemplary. Harris is lucky to have you. Talia glanced at him, her chest tight. We're all making it out, Captain. No other option. They burst back into auxiliary control where Marines and survivors waited. Sergeant Mills's eyes widened. Commander, the whole ship's going haywire. What the hell did you do? Bought us a window, Talia said briskly. 25 minutes to get everyone off this ship before it collapses. Move. As the first shuttle loaded with survivors, her comm finally cleared. Harris's voice came through strained but steady commander status. Talia's reply was firm. Evacuating now. We have 30 survivors ready for extraction. Horizon self-destruct in 25 minutes. A pause, then in Harris's voice low and proud. Understood. We'll cover you. Bring them home, Commander. The corridors of the Horizon shook as if the ship itself were crying out in agony. Lights flickered erratically, beams of energy sparked from ruptured conduits, and the very air seemed to warp with unstable currents of time. Talia stood at the junction outside auxiliary control, barking orders, as Marines hustled terrified survivors toward the shuttle bay. Her stabilizer glowed faintly, fighting against the distortion that was growing stronger with every passing minute. 23 minutes, she called, glancing at her readout. Move fast, people. Every second counts. Sergeant Mills shoved 2 younger crewmen toward the shuttle corridor. You heard the commander move? He turned back to her, sweat streaking his face. We've got about 30 survivors ready for lift. That's more than double capacity. Then we'll make multiple trips, Talia replied, her tone sharp. No one gets left behind. As the first shuttle docked and opened its hatch, survivors shuffled aboard under Marine supervision. The ship's interior trembled with another violent shudder, throwing some off their feet. Talia caught a Lycian girl barely into adulthood and steadied her. The girl's eyes, silver violet like her own, looked up at her with desperate hope. Are we really getting out? She whispered. Talia's voice softened but carried conviction. Yes, you're going home. Back on the Intrepid, Harris gripped his cane as the bridge bucked under another Draconid salvo. Shields at 30%, Reese shouted, hands flying over the console. Hull breaches on Deck 4 sealed by emergency force fields. Keep their fire on us, Harris ordered, his voice a steady anchor. Cover the evacuation. If they want the Horizon, they'll have to go through us. Parker at the helm glanced over his shoulder. Sir, we're already pushing the limits. If the Draconids bring their reinforcements to bear, then we'll hold them, Harris growled. His gaze never left the tactical display. One blinking dot, Talia's shuttle was making its return across the chaos. He would not let it be lost. Inside the Horizon, Talia coordinated the next group. Captain Mercer stood beside her, still refusing to board until the last survivor was accounted for. His uniform was tattered, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes blazed with the same fire Harris had described years ago. Captain, she urged you should be on the next shuttle. Mercer shook his head. A captain leaves last. Always. Another tremor rocked the ship. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the distortion shimmered brighter, the air warping like ripples in a pond. Chesterfield, the engineer, glanced at his scanner. Core instability accelerating. Collapse in less than 20 minutes. Then we move faster, Talia snapped. The second shuttle arrived, Marines rushing survivors aboard. Families clung to each other. Officers helped wounded comrades hobble forward, and the Lycian girl clutched Talia's sleeve before letting go to board. The shuttle hatch sealed, and it blasted free, streaking back toward the Intrepid. Commander Harris's voice crackled over comms. Status. Second shuttle away, 15 survivors on board. Approximate collapse in 19 minutes. Understood, we'll hold the line. His voice carried a weight she knew well, a determination sharpened by guilt, steadied by resolve. Then came the alarm. A console blared red as one of Mercer's officers shouted, "Boarding party Deck 4 breach." Talia's head snapped toward the sound of distant impacts echoing through the ship. Her heart sank. The Draconids weren't content to wait. They were coming to finish the survivors themselves. How long until they reach us, she demanded. Minutes at most. She made her decision instantly. Get the survivors to the shuttle. Now. Mercer frowned. And you? I'll hold them off. Commander, she cut him off with the same steel Harris had once shown her. Your crew needs you alive, Captain, and Harris needs to know what happened here. That means you get on the shuttle. That's an order. For a long moment, Mercer held her gaze. Then reluctantly, he nodded. Good luck, Commander. And thank you. Talia sprinted down the corridor, weapon drawn. The sound of heavy boots and guttural alien growls echoed closer, reverberating through the unstable metal. She slid into position at a junction rifle braced against her shoulder, breath steady. The first Draconid appeared, a towering figure in biomechanical armor, its reptilian face visible through a transparent visor. It hissed, raising a weapon that crackled with unstable energy. Talia fired. The bolt struck the joint between plates, sending the creature stumbling with a roar. More shapes emerged behind it, 2, 3, 4. Their weapons spewed beams that warped the air, tearing chunks of metal from the bulkheads. She ducked into a side corridor, firing as she retreated. Every shot had to count, every step measured. Her stabilizer buzzed angrily, its glow dimming as the distortions intensified. Commander status. Harris's voice pressed into her ear, tight with concern. Draconid boarding party, she reported tersely. Final shuttle away. I'm making for an escape pod. Damn it, Talia, get out of there now. Working on it, Captain, she said, her tone a grim attempt at humor. She rounded a corner, ducking into a maintenance shaft that bypassed the main hall. Behind her, the Draconid's guttural roars echoed, accompanied by the hiss of their weapons. The escape pod bay loomed ahead, its lights flickering wildly. Talia skidded to a halt, weapon raised. The bay was empty, the final shuttle had launched, and the last pod sat waiting. Her comm buzzed again. Harris's voice steadier now, almost calm. We've recovered the survivors. We need you back. Commander, collapse in 10 minutes. Understood, she replied, sprinting for the pod. The deck shook violently as the temporal core destabilized further. Bulkheads warped to reality itself, stuttering. Her vision blurred, and for a split second, she saw herself standing further down the hall, a ghost of her own future or past. She shook her head, forcing herself onward. The Draconids burst into the bay behind her, their roars shaking the walls. Energy bolts lanced past one, grazing her shoulder. Pain flared, but she dove into the pod, slamming the hatch. The pod ejected with a violent jolt, its engines firing to push it free of the horizon. Through the viewport, Talia glimpsed the alien warriors pounding against the sealed hatch, their forms warping as distortions consumed the bay. Then the distance grew, and the Intrepid's bulk filled her view. The docking clamp caught the pod with a metallic clang. The airlock cycled, and the door hissed open. Harris stood there. Not a junior officer, not a medical crew. Harris himself, cane gripped tightly in one hand, the lines of command etched into his face. Relief softened his eyes, though his voice remained formal. Commander, he said, welcome back. Talia stepped aboard, her body aching, her uniform scorched, but her resolve unbroken. Survivors secured. Horizon core collapse in 8 minutes. Understood, Harris replied. Bridge, now. The Intrepid's bridge buzzed with frantic energy. Alarms blared, consoles spat sparks, and the ship shuddered under constant fire. On the main view screen, the horizon drifted in the distance, its hull fracturing under the unstable glow of its core. Shields at 28%, reported. Weapons at 60, FTL spooling 6 minutes to readiness. Collapse in 7, Talia added grimly. Then we cut it close, Harris said, his eyes locked on the tactical display. Helm plot a course out of the system, maximum acceleration, tactical target, their lead vessel's propulsion. Buy us breathing room. The Intrepid surged forward, blasting a hole in the Draconid formation. Enemy ships reeled under the assault, but more were closing in. Then Talia's scanner shrieked. Energy surged from the horizon core, destabilization accelerating. 4 minutes. Harris's jaw tightened. FTL status. Still 6 minutes, Parker replied. A grim realization passed through the bridge. They wouldn't outrun the blast. Talia's mind raced. Captain, I can reconfigure the deflector array. If we emit a phase-shifted pulse at the moment of detonation, we can ride the edge of the shockwave instead of being consumed by it. Harris looked at her. Can it be done? Yes, she said without hesitation. But it'll need real-time calibration. I'll handle it. Harris's gaze held hers. He knew now her secret knowledge, her role in the initiative. But there was no accusation in his eyes, only trust. Do it. The countdown ticked. On the view screen, the horizon flared with unnatural light, its core collapsing inward like a dying star. 30 seconds, Talia called, her hands flying over the deflector controls. Harris's voice carried over the ship-wide comms, steady as steel. All hands brace for impact. Whatever happens next, know that you've served with honor. The crew straightened, their fears steeled into resolve. 10 seconds, Talia whispered. The horizon erupted. Not with fire, but with fractured reality. Space itself split into concentric ripples of distorted light, a temporal shock wave radiating outward with terrifying speed. Impact in 15 seconds. Now Commander Harris barked. Talia engaged the counter-resonance field. The Intrepid shuddered violently, its hull groaning as the wave slammed into them. Time fractured, sound stretched, movements, lagged lights flickered in impossible patterns. Crew members seemed to blur, caught between instants. But the field held. The Intrepid rode the edge of the storm, its bubble deflecting the worst of the shockwave. Behind them, Draconid ships weren't so lucky. On the view screen, enemy vessels twisted grotesquely, some frozen in repeating loops, others vanishing into nothing as time tore them apart. Seconds stretched into eternity, then as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Status, Harris demanded. Shields at 5%, Ree reported. Minor hull breaches contained. FTL drive, functional. Jump ready in 30 seconds. Talia exhaled, her stabilizer dimming to silence. Counter-resonance field successful, minimal lasting distortion. Harris's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Then let's get the hell out of here. Helm jump. Stars streaked as the Intrepid leapt to safety, leaving the shattered ghost of the horizon and the wrecked Draconid fleet behind. The Intrepid emerged from FTL with a bone-deep shudder. On the bridge, silence reigned for a long moment as the crew collectively exhaled, the weight of survival settling in. Warning klaxons finally went quiet, replaced by the softer hum of systems stabilizing. Report, Harris ordered, his voice carrying the quiet authority of command. Shields at 5%, Ree replied. Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7 sealed by force fields. Weapons offline until repairs. FTL drive stable. Casualties minimal. Harris allowed himself a rare breath of relief. They had escaped. Against all odds, the Intrepid and her crew were alive. Talia looked up from her console, her iridescent eyes steady despite exhaustion. Counter-resonance field performed within expected parameters. Temporal distortion effects were temporary, no permanent anomalies detected. Good, Harris said simply. He leaned heavily on his cane, the adrenaline finally ebbing. His silver hair glinted under the bridge lights, and the lines around his eyes seemed deeper, carved by both years and battles. But his gaze remained sharp. He turned to Parker. Set course for Terran Fleet Command. Full burn until we clear hostile sectors. Aye, Captain. 3 days later, the Intrepid docked at Terran Fleet headquarters. Its hull bore scars of battle plasma burns etched into its armor, but it arrived intact and carrying its survivors, thought lost for 15 years. Debriefings were immediate and exhaustive. Admiral Reeves himself presided, his round face uncharacteristically solemn, as Captain Mercer stood before the council recounting the horrors of the Horizon's captivity. The Draconid experiments, the temporal drive core. The crew stretched across fractured time. Talia, seated at his side, provided technical details, her precise explanations of phase shift distortions, confirming the Draconid's advancements. Reeves and the council listened with rapt attention, their expressions grim. The implications were staggering, an enemy capable of bending not just space but time itself. When the session finally adjourned, Reeves dismissed Mercer with honors. You and your crew will be commended, Captain. The Defiant, a brand new heavy cruiser, awaits your command. Mercer inclined his head. It will be an honor, Admiral. His gaze flicked briefly to Harris in the back of the room, then to Talia before he departed with his surviving officers. Later on the observation deck, Earth turned slowly below. Its blue-green surface swirled with white clouds, timeless and eternal, even as men and women bent time itself in war. Talia stood at the viewport, her hands clasped behind her back. Her lavender skin glowed faintly in the station's light, the faint silver markings along her arms catching the glow. Her long hair fell loose for once, not bound in regulation braids. It never changes, Harris said, joining her. His cane tapped softly against the deck as he came to stand beside her. Earth, she asked. Yes. He looked out at the homeworld, eyes thoughtful. After everything, after wars, colonies, fleets, Earth is always there. The cradle of humanity. Talia smiled faintly. More than you think. My people have a saying, the stars guide all paths, but some paths cross for a reason. Harris's gaze shifted to her, philosophical. We have our moments. She hesitated, then said, I received new orders today. The initiative has been officially acknowledged. I'm to continue my work, but this time with full disclosure to my commanding officer. Harris raised a brow. That would be me. If you'll have me, she said quietly. After everything, I would understand if you requested a different first officer. He studied her for a long moment, then shook his head. And lose the only officer who knows how to ride a temporal shockwave? Not a chance. Relief flickered in her eyes, quickly masked by composure. Harris's tone grew more serious. Besides, I've come to value your council, Commander. Secret initiative or not. Thank you, Captain. They stood in silence for a while, the planet turning beneath them. Later that evening, Harris summoned her to his ready room. She entered posture straight, but he could see the faint weariness in her movements. You knew about the temporal technology, he said without preamble. You were placed on my ship because of it. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes, sir. Why wasn't I told? The initiative was classified. Need to know only. Harris leaned heavily on his desk. I'm the captain of this vessel. The lives of my crew are my responsibility. That qualifies as need to know. She met his gaze directly. You're right, and if I could have told you, I would have. Admiral Reeves, the Joint Chiefs, they made the call. Harris's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. My service record is real, Talia continued. Every promotion, every commendation. I earned them. The only omission was my work with the initiative. I'm not a spy, Captain. I'm a specialist. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Harris sighed, some of the tension easing. You saved the ship commander, and Mercer, and 43 souls who should have been long dead. I can't argue with results. Thank you, sir. But Harris added, his voice hardening again, no more secrets. Not between us. If we're going to face enemies who can twist time itself, I need to know I can trust my first officer completely. You can, she said firmly. He studied her for a long moment, then extended his hand. Then perhaps we start fresh. Her lavender fingers closed around his weathered human hand. The contrast was striking, alien and human, past and present, bound by duty and something deeper. I'd like that, Captain, she said softly. Days later, medals were awarded. In a solemn ceremony, Admiral Reeves pinned the Star of Valor on Talia's uniform, the highest commendation in the fleet. She bowed her head as the medal's weight settled against her chest. I don't know what to say, she murmured afterward. Thank you usually works, Harris said dryly, standing beside her. She chuckled softly, then turned serious. 15 years ago, when I scrubbed decks on the Dauntless, I never imagined I'd be standing here. Life has a way of surprising you, Harris replied. When I took this command, I thought it would be my last, a quiet mission before retirement. Instead, I found myself in a temporal war with the fate of the fleet at stake. His eyes met hers, a spark returning that had been missing when he first came aboard. Now, Commander Nix, I find myself wondering what adventures await us next. Her lips curved into a small, genuine smile. It's an honor to serve with you, Captain. And the honor, Harris said, his silver hair gleaming under the lights, is mine. Together, they turned from the ceremony, walking side by side down the station corridor. Earth turned below, timeless and eternal. The homeworld of a species that had reached for the stars found both wonders and terrors and never stopped pushing forward. Humanity's spirit endured, and with it the unlikeliest of bonds. An old captain haunted by guilt. A young alien forged in secrets. Two paths crossing for a reason. The stars waited vast and endless. And the intrepid, scarred but unbroken, would sail among them.